Thank you, David. And we are on item number 2, that is Chair's announcement. As you see, our meeting is, as usual, also being web streamed. The meeting will take place in English with interpretation in French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Polish. It is mandatory for members present in the meeting room to wear a mask at all times, including while speaking. Only members sharing meetings are exempt from this requirement. Back to you, David.
Thank you, Thomas Tobé, for your introductory remarks. And now we move on to item number 3, the exchange of views on the situation in Afghanistan. I would like to welcome all of you to this extraordinary joint meeting of the AFET and DEVA committees on the situation in Afghanistan. This meeting is held in association with the delegations for relations with Afghanistan, so I'd also like to welcome Chairman Petros Austrevicius. In particular, I would like to warmly welcome the High Representative and Vice President of the Commission, Josep Borrell, to our meeting. Dear Josep, thank you for making your availability possible this Thursday morning. Afghanistan has been in our focus in previous joint meetings as the country was standing at a crucial juncture, yet the situation changed rapidly, and the dramatic developments of the past days call again for an urgent discussion and action. The entire world is following these developments with a heavy heart, with uncertainty and with fear. We have seen the withdrawal of US and NATO allied forces from the country. We have seen a collapse of Afghan institutions, the resignation of the government, and the defeat of its security forces, allowing the Taliban to take over the entire country in an unexpectedly rapid way. We've all seen the images from Kabul and other Afghan cities where the situation is very worrying. The fall of Afghanistan into the hands of the Taliban poses an enormous challenge for the international community and those who tried so hard to rebuild the country. So we have many, many reasons to be very concerned about the humanitarian and security situation in Afghanistan and the broader region. The violence brought by the Taliban and the other groups has reached new heights, as witnessed by the continued attacks on children, on women, on activists, journalists and government officials. At this critical and dramatic moment, humanitarian action should be our top priority. The European Union should urgently call upon all parties to refrain from violence and secure the safe and orderly departure of foreign nationals, human rights activists, humanitarian aid workers and Afghans who helped to rebuild Afghanistan and who risked their lives. The European Union needs a new approach for Afghanistan and the entire region, which takes into account the new circumstances and the fact that other global players, especially Russia and China, will try to fill the political vacuum in the country. We need to present a united front and work closely with our partners and allies in preserving peace and security in this region. With this in mind, dear colleagues, I would now like to ask from the High Representative and Vice President, Josep Borrell, on his assessment of the situation in Afghanistan, especially following the EU Foreign Ministers' video conference on Tuesday. What is the status of the EU staff, which was located in Afghanistan? And what should the role of the European Union be in preventing further violence, alleviating the humanitarian crisis in the country, as well as our approach to the security challenges in the region? Before this, let me first once again give the floor to the Chair of the DEVA Committee, Thomas Tobé. Thomas.
Thank you, David. I want to underline the importance of organizing this joint extraordinary meeting at such a short notice, following the dramatic fall of the government and the takeover of Kabul by the Taliban on Sunday evening. It is important for the European Parliament and for the European Union as a whole to closely follow the situation and exert our influence to support the Afghan population. Last May, in our joint debate with the EU Acting Special Envoy for Afghanistan, we discussed the high degree of uncertainty for the country that the expected departure of US and NATO troops would entail. Many members stressed the need to preserve the advantages made, and notably education and job opportunities for women and girls, which is one of the few success stories in the country over the past 2 decades. Despite the generally pessimistic assessment, notably, I would say no one expected the situation to unfold so quickly. There are many unanswered questions regarding how the entire country fell to a Taliban offensive in just a few weeks. The European Union and its member states should examine these questions, as well as the result of the international assistance provided in the past 20 years, and draw the relevant lessons for the future engagement in Afghanistan and other fragile and conflict situations. In the short term, however, and as underlined already by David, priority must be to preventing further violence and ensuring the protection of basic human rights in the country. The new Afghan leaders must ensure the respect of international humanitarian law and grant humanitarian access across the country. Violence, drought, and the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in 18 million people, nearly half of the country, being in need of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. There are also more than 4 million people internally displaced and living in precarious conditions. These numbers are very likely to increase following the recent political developments. So it is essential that the international community continues to support the Afghan population, and that Taliban leaders ensure that local and international actors delivering humanitarian assistance can continue to carry on their activities in safety. These are just some initial thoughts on the situation before hearing from High Representative Vice President Mr. Borrell. But now I give back the floor to David McAllister.
Thank you, Thomas Tobé, for your introductory remarks. And now, without further ado, I give the floor to the High Representative and Vice President. Dear Josep, the floor is yours.
Mr. Borrell, you can press on the speak button once, please.
Ara? Now?
We can hear you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning to all of you, honourable members of the European Parliament. Let's approach the dramatic developments in Afghanistan and the response of the European Union to this situation. Since Sunday, we have been facing a new and painful reality on the ground in Afghanistan. Let me speak clearly and bluntly. This is a catastrophe. This is a catastrophe for the Afghan people, for the Western values and credibility, and for the developing of international relations. Was it foreseeable? Was it preventable? In any case, it's a nightmare because, you know, even if tonight the first 106 members of our staff of the European Union delegation has landed in Madrid, we cannot take all Afghan people out of the country. And we have to face a situation in which we can say that they must. The important thing is what we can. What has happened raises many questions about the West 20 years engagement in the country and what we were able to achieve. Let us recall that the first objective was to fight Al-Qaeda in the wake of the attack of September 11. But gradually the collective ambition shifted towards the construction of a modern state in Afghanistan. President Biden said the other day that it has never been the purpose. The state building was not the purpose. Well, this is arguable. We have been doing a lot in order to build a state in Afghanistan. A state that could guarantee the rule of law and the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, especially those of women, girls and ethnic minorities. And today, 20 years on, we can say that we may have succeeded on the first tag of our mission, but failed in the second. We even say that it was not a mission. That's an important issue to discuss about. Was that a mission? We have to ask ourselves some difficult questions to understand why this was possible and why what has happened. I was with the President of Afghanistan some weeks ago in the Central Asia, in Tashkent. I talked with him about the situation in Afghanistan, and he was very bitter. And he was really worried about the possibility of keeping the country in front of the Taliban offensive. But certainly nobody expected. Where are our intelligence in order to have a clear look at what was going to happen? Nobody was expecting it. Even the Taliban were expecting it. There are lessons to draw from the failure of this nation-building operation, conducted with an unprecedented amount of resources. The US has spent $300 million a day for the last 20 years, $300 million a day, but ultimately with very modest results. Faced with the disturbing images of Taliban takeover and desperation in Kabul, we Europeans and the international community have to ask ourselves what went wrong. Earlier this week, I convened a meeting of my colleagues of Foreign Affairs Council of Afghanistan. The purpose was twofold: to develop a common understanding and assessment of this situation and to have a exchange of views on how the EU should position itself vis-à-vis the new political realities in Kabul. What we cannot do is to let the Chinese and Russians to take control of the situation and be the supporters of the Kabul, and we became irrelevant. Many questions remain unanswered as to what the future power formation in Afghanistan will look like. There are negotiations. I've been talking with Secretary of State Blinken about it, about the possibility of the Taliban willing to have let's say, a kind of a national unity government, incorporating some of the political players of the former government. That's talks about, and they were asking for support for these talks. Yes, for sure. It's better to have Abdullah and people like him belonging to the former government and the new government, but allow me to be skeptical about this possibility, even if we have to support it, if there is a slight chance of happening. The Taliban may choose to govern alone and to reestablish the Islamic Emirate, or they could opt to include also other elements of the Afghan political elite under a power-sharing agreement. The shared priority of all our EU ministers now is the evacuation of the European Union nationals. I have to tell you that tonight, in the first hours of this day, the first 106 members and their families of our staff of the European Union delegations landed in Madrid. Thanks again to the Spanish government for willing to accept them before to relocate among different member states. But first we had to take them out. And to take someone out, you have to take these people in somewhere. And it was not so easy. And the Spanish government accepted all of them before redistributing. Let's hope that this redistribution operation will work, and we are not going to show once again our differences and fight about who takes care of these people. There are still 300 more Afghan staff of the European Union delegations blocked on the streets of Kabul, trying to reach the airport and trying to have a seat on some of the European Union member states' flights going to Kabul. These people have loyally promoted and defended European Union interests and values in Afghanistan over many years. It's our moral duty to protect them and to help to save as many people as possible. I've been engaged on this on the last 4 days, and I want to thank also our head of delegation in Kabul, who is still there, alone. I'm going to send there 4 more people, not just withdrawing, but sending. And our special envoy for Afghanistan, accompanied by 3 officers, in order to try to deblock the situation of these 300 people who are still out of the world of the airport. But as I said before, we cannot take all Afghan people out. But at least let's try to do that with the people who were working with us for many years. In our delegation, and the European Union Humanitarian Aid Office in Kabul and their families, this number could grow further to also include those who worked for the European Union in the past, and more broadly, human rights defenders, women activists and civil society representatives who are in danger for defending our values. As I said, the intense work is ongoing. Of the 400 local Afghan staff and their families that need to be evacuated, as I said, my speaker note says they are on their way. I can say today that they have landed in Europe, in Madrid. You would appreciate that I cannot go into greater detail on what is a difficult and dangerous operation, because there are still 300 more on the way to the airport. I am in close contact with Tony Blinken and with the Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg. The US have to send specialized troops in order to take control of the situation in the airport, military police, trained to face a mob, to face a mass of people, not combat troops, which are not trained for this kind of situation. From some hours, the operation of the airport was completely stopped. Now it's working again, but the situation remains very, very difficult to manage. At the Foreign Affairs Council ministers, everybody agreed that the main worry should be the situation of women, girls, human rights defenders. Everybody agreed on that. The important thing is, how do we put our wishes into action? How do we implement it? To be concerned, everybody can be concerned. The important thing is, how do you convert our concern in action? We need to consolidate action in this regard. To release the declaration was crystal clear. We have to support Afghan people, not only the one who wants to leave, but the ones who will have to stay. The potential of increased migratory flows from Afghanistan was also discussed, and ministers underlined the need for a common European Union approach and EU solidarity with member states at the external borders of the European Union. I want to remember you there is a directive from 2001 that has never been used, and this may be the occasion to use it, and in order to face a situation of a mass migration problem that can affect some member states. It's not the case today, because Afghanistan is much further away than Syria, and people cannot go walking. By the time being, it's a matter of some thousands of people in the airport, but in the days or weeks or months to come, it may be a matter of many more people with the airport closed, willing to leave the country, and this wave can reach us. But I don't think we have to present the problem as from the security point of view, of us in front of migrants. First, don't call them migrants. They are exile people who are flying to save their lives. Okay, the fact I made a number of concrete proposals to address the current situation. We need to establish channels of communication with the current power holders in Kabul. We need to talk with them to prevent this situation. But we have to be clear about the establishing channel of communication does not imply in any way the political and international recognition of the Taliban. I said we had to talk with them, and some people were, oh my God, he said that he wants to talk with the Taliban. Yes, I had to talk with the Taliban, but it doesn't mean recognition at all. We must step humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan and also increase support for neighboring countries so that they can cope better with the negative spillover effects in terms of migration, increased risk of terrorism and drug trafficking. And we need to engage actively with our regional and international partners that have a stake in the future of Afghanistan. And we were aware that Turkey, China, and Russia will have a new opportunity to increase their influence. There are all other countries, Iran, Pakistan, India, that are all Central Asian nations that will have to be taken into consideration in our diplomatic reach out. Central Asia will become a more strategic region, important region for us. Well, certainly current developments are going to have a wide-ranging impact on regional and international security, because what has happened is the most important geopolitical event since the Crimea annexation by Russia. And we will have to work closely with the US and to step up diplomatic efforts to forge a consensus among our allies so that we can develop an effective common approach. Later, in some hours, I will join my G7 colleagues in a virtual meeting to discuss more about that. And next week, the leaders of the G7 will also have a meeting. Well, I think that's more or less what I have to say to you. I had 10 minutes. I exhausted my time. And I could repeat once and again what I've already said. But I think it is important that I can count on your support on the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Giuseppe, for your remarks and your statement. I will now open the floor to members, starting with remarks by the Chair of the Delegation for Relations with Afghanistan, our colleague Petras Austrevicius. Petras, please keep it to 3 to 4 minutes.
Thank you, David. I'm sorry I will be only audio today with you, but it's better to pass the message rather than to abstain from it. Dear chairs, dear colleagues, Mr. Borrell, friends of Afghanistan, I thank you all for our joint efforts assembling this meeting on the situation in Afghanistan. Once again, Afghanistan is placed on top global agenda. Country undergoes major and dramatic changes. People are facing with great uncertainty and various risks. During the European Parliament, an Afghanistan interparliamentary meeting held on 15th of July, only a month ago, we could not imagine it might be most probably our last meeting, an open exchange. At that meeting, our Afghan colleagues tried to convey increasing worries and tell a story of rapidly deteriorating security environment. Today we have to reflect on Afghanistan in post-Taliban takeover. Rapid and little resistance met of Afghanistan National Army and security forces could be described as a huge disappointment at least. So much invested, trained and supported, it did not defend the country's gates and people. Deeply entrenched corruption, weak governance and inside political infight did not leave a chance for society consolidation and mobilization. A chance to build a new future of Afghan people vanished. I'm sorry to admit this. The new situation, which emerged almost by light speed, characterized by, firstly, a new security situation with Taliban on top, still having a title of terrorist organization. Secondly, increased uncertainty in socio-economic development. And a question of keeping our achievements during the past 20 years. Thirdly, major question of respecting human rights. Firstly, women's and girls' rights. And fourthly, emerging migration risks and brain drain. With all that, we need for a new strategy for Afghanistan. Existing policy is not anymore valid and corresponds the current situation. And finally, I call on EU institutions to increase coordination efforts for EU residents and our Afghan associates' evacuation from Kabul. Instead of doing each on its own, we need a joint European Union level coordination action for safe and appropriate evacuation. Dear colleagues, dramatic and rapidly changing situation in Afghanistan needs further and full involvement of the European Parliament. I call on all political groups to initiate an extraordinary plenary session to discuss the situation in Afghanistan and inform our European citizens and the world about our actions and position taken. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Petros Austrevicius. Thank you also for sticking exactly to your time. I will now pass the floor to the chairs of our subcommittees, Droit and Sede, and we'll begin with Maria Arena, who's here with me in the room in Brussels. 2.5 minutes, Maria.
Merci David. Je pense que je peux parler en français avec la traduction. Merci David et Thomas pour l'organisation de cette réunion extraordinaire. Merci à Josep Borrell pour déjà ses positions et les positions qu'il a prises et sa présence aujourd'hui. On le sait, la situation en Afghanistan doit nous faire réfléchir et tirer les leçons d'une politique basée sur l'intervention militaire qui aujourd'hui a montré son impuissance. On peut parler de l'impuissance de la puissance. On a aussi, et on voit qu'on vit dans un monde éclaté où les conflits sont plus basés sur des tensions sociales importantes, comme dans d'autres pays dans lesquels nous avons aussi des présences militaires. Et là aussi, une réflexion doit se poser. Mais aujourd'hui, ce qui se passe, c'est l'urgence. L'urgence d'agir pour les populations directement menacées et qui souhaitent quitter le pays. On a parlé de ceux qui ont travaillé avec les Occidentaux, mais aussi les activistes et les défenseurs des droits de l'homme. Mais aussi l'urgence de protéger celles et ceux qui resteront dans le pays, comme les populations déplacées, avec une aide humanitaire. Et enfin, l'urgence de protéger des activistes qui resteront dans le pays, tels que Zarifa Garafi, qui est la mère de Maïdachar et qui a décidé de rester dans son pays pour défendre le droit des femmes. Alors, Monsieur Borrell, le 24 août, une réunion extraordinaire du Conseil des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies est convoquée. Et les représentants permanents ainsi que la Commission indépendante afghane des droits de l'homme demandent l'instauration d'un mécanisme d'investigation sur les violations des droits de l'homme. Je pense qu'il est important à la fois que l'Union européenne, Parlement, Commission et Conseil, États membres, puissent soutenir une demande telle que celle-là pour déjà démarrer une action positive concernant la défense des droits de l'homme dans le pays. Merci.
Merci bien, Maria Arena. And now I give the floor for 2.5 minutes to Nathalie Loiseau for the SEDE subcommittee.
Merci, cher David, et merci, cher Joseph, d'être avec nous ce matin. Et merci pour des paroles très sincères et qui font du bien à entendre parce que dans ce moment très particulier, nous devons être honnêtes avec nous-mêmes. Être honnête avec nous-mêmes, c'est admettre que nous avons vécu sur l'Afghanistan un petit peu la grande illusion. Nous avons cru qu'il y avait un État afghan et il s'est effondré. Nous avons cru qu'il y avait une armée afghane et elle s'est débandée. Nous avons cru qu'il y avait des négociations crédibles au Qatar et c'était un leurre. Nous avons aussi cru que l'Amérique était de retour alors que l'Amérique se retire. Nous avons enfin cru, et Joseph, tu l'as dit, que l'OTAN était capable de faire du nation building, et ça aussi c'était une grande illusion. Moi, je voudrais me concentrer, il y a beaucoup à dire, mais me concentrer sur les aspects de sécurité. Évidemment, les conséquences de la prise du pouvoir par les talibans sont d'abord redoutables pour le peuple afghan lui-même, et elles sont sérieuses pour l'Europe. Plusieurs questions. comment faire face à la menace terroriste. On sait par exemple que les prisonniers de la prison de Bagram ont tous été libérés, parmi eux de nombreux combattants d'Al-Qaïda et de nombreux chefs d'Al-Qaïda. Quelles sont les conséquences du désastre afghan sur les réflexions qui sont menées sur la boussole stratégique? D'abord sur la qualité de notre renseignement, parce qu'on ne peut pas continuer à dire que nous étions étonnés que l'Afghanistan s'effondre si vite. Qu'est-ce que nous avons mal su? Ensuite, sur notre capacité à organiser des évacuations coordonnées, parce que ce que décrit Joseph Borrel et le chaos qui règne sur l'aéroport de Kaboul nous montre qu'il faut qu'on fasse beaucoup plus pour être capable d'évacuer de manière européenne nos personnels, ceux qui ont travaillé pour nous en sécurité et avec de l'expérience. Quelles conséquences nous en tirons sur cette phase de repli américain durable que nous n'avons pas voulu admettre jusqu'à présent, mais qui maintenant est flagrante? Quelles conséquences pour notre sécurité? Et enfin, quand nous réfléchissons sur les conséquences du désastre afghan sur l'Europe, j'utilise le mot Europe exprès, parce que ça dépasse de beaucoup l'Union européenne, et en particulier, je voudrais savoir quel dialogue nous avons avec le Royaume-Uni sur l'Afghanistan. Est-ce que nous sommes capables de nous coordonner, de discuter ensemble de ce que nous allons faire? Quels sont les efforts que nous déployons dans ce sens et si possible quels sont les premiers résultats? Merci.
Thank you also to you, Nathalie Loiseau. Dear colleagues, as I have been informed that the High Representative and Vice President might need to leave shortly, I would suggest now to give him the floor first for a first intervention after what he has heard by some of our members for a first reaction. And depending on how long Josep Borrell can remain in this meeting, we'll then continue the debate with the coordinators and other members, with Fernando Gentilini, the Managing Director of the European External Action Service, who is currently acting as Secretary General, and he will answer the remaining questions at the end of the meeting. But first, let me go back to Josep Borrell.
Well, thank you for these comments. In fact, I can share whatever has been said. No? Let me, once again, with the last news that I have today, is that my first priority as responsible for the External Action Service is to bring home the 400 people who have been working with us, European Union, not with me, not with the External Action Service, with all services of the European Union institutions there and their families. There are 400 people. As I said, about 106, I think that the exact figure is already in Madrid. And the other 300 are still trying to reach the airport. And Nathalie has said that we should organize better our efforts to bring them back home. That's what we are trying to do. But first, they have to reach the airport, and second, they have to take a place in some of the planes. The most difficult thing is to reach the airport. We are trying to do whatever we can. Nathalie, believe me, we have sent, as I said, 4 more people there to try to help on that. It will not be possible to do that without a kind of arrangement with the Taliban who control the streets of Kabul. And the second thing is the political approach. We have to distinguish between humanitarian help and development aid. Humanitarian help will have to be increased. Partnership, development aid has to be stopped until we know who is ruling Afghanistan and which is their behavior. We have a conditionality on the use of our resources. But humanitarian help is something independent of the political situation. And I am afraid that if the Taliban take the women out of the work, and they will do, well, the production, the agricultural production will decrease. And the climate change will have, is having already devastating effects in the agricultural sector in Afghanistan. For sure, we will have a scarcity of food. We will have to prevent, to face the situation and increase our humanitarian support. One thing is one thing and another thing is another thing. We will have to stop our financing, and this is one of our leverages. But we have to know with whom are we going to talk. Natalie asked about what our relationship with the United Kingdom. We have been talking with them, and we are going to have this meeting of the G7 in some hours. As I said, the US are willing to support the creation of a national unity government in Afghanistan. By the time being, the Taliban are presenting a nice face. The last press conference of the Taliban leaders are saying, don't worry, we are good guys, for sure, inside the Muslim law. But frankly speaking, we have to be very cautious. As far as our people are still there, we have to be extremely cautious, because the first of our purposes is to take these people out. But as I said also, we cannot take all Afghans out. And we can preach and we can say that all people who have been supporting our values, all will not be able to go out in our planes on those days before the reports gets closed. So the problem will be what's happening after the withdrawal. And there comes the moment in which we have to develop our diplomatic capacity, and we have to, with our like-minded countries, with our close allies, especially the US and also the United Kingdom, to be able to forge an alliance to face the geopolitical consequences of what has happened. And what will happen? China has already recognized the Taliban. Russia will do it. They are not going to close their embassies there, but just the contrary. They are going to increase their presence. And this is going to change the geopolitical balance of power. And the words of European strategic autonomy will be again in the table. And we'll have to discuss more about what does it mean, how do we use it. And crisis is an opportunity, and this will be also an opportunity for us to develop our thinking and our action about the European Union acting in the world, behaving as a geopolitical actor. Let's see what we are going to be able to do. And for that, it will require unity. And the unity will have the occasion to be proof in small things and in big things. For example, this statement asking for people of Afghanistan being free to leave if they want has been signed by more than 60, almost 70 member states of the United Nations, but not by all European Union member states. Not by all. Let's see how difficult it will be to relocate these 400 people from Madrid to other capitals. Let's see which is going to be our unity when we are going to deal with immigration pressure. All that will be on the table, and you, European members of the European Parliament, will have a very important occasion to push and to ask for decisive political action. But I would like to stay a little bit more, have some moments to listen to the representative of the political groups before I let Fernando to try to continue this discussion, because I have to go to prepare the G7 meeting. Thank you, David.
Thank you once again, Josep Borrell. I will now give the floor to the coordinators or their replacements for both committees, AFET and DEVE. Colleagues, we have today a time slot until roughly 10:30, so this now leaves us with 45 minutes' time. I know that so many of you would like to take the floor in addition to the coordinators. Unfortunately, this won't be possible, but we'll try to cover as many colleagues as possible. The best is if every one of you sticks exactly to the allocated speaking time of 2 minutes. We begin for the EPP group with Michael Gahler, the coordinator in AFET.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Josep Borrell and colleagues. I think we share the assessment. We are all devastated. We see this catastrophe for the political West that needs to be addressed later at a later stage and assessed. For the short term, I think when it comes to the rescue of our citizens and of our collaborators, thanks to you, Josep Borrell, I'm pretty sure that in the background you have personally invested a lot to get these 106 out, and hopefully we'll get the others also. I hear that, or we see in the media that apparently it's not only the Taliban who are problematic with the access to the airport, but also the American soldiers who are standing there and not letting a lot in. Can we hopefully get contact with the US administration, asking them to accept Western passports and documentation when people are allowed to leave? Please engage in this regard. My question is, when it comes to the humanitarian aid that is still possible, do we know which channels of the UN probably are still working to distribute humanitarian aid? I think that is of short-term importance as well. The next point is, of course, with the neighboring countries, with Iran, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. These are the first ones where refugees will probably show up. Are we in contact with these governments? What are our plans in this regard? How can we help these countries to get shelter for possible refugees that are coming? And I very much welcome, of course, that we take the contacts with the de facto regime. As we want something from them, we have to talk to them, and that does not mean recognition. I think that is a correct approach that you are taking. Insofar, we should also make it very clear from the beginning that there is clear conditionality of any further possible cooperation in whatever regards. It requires a respect of basic human rights, and we will use the fate of women and girls as the litmus test for how far we can in future cooperate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael Gahler, especially for these precise questions. And now I give the floor to Hildegard Bentele, representing the EPP in the DEVE committee.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David. Thank you. Michael made my points, actually. My question was also what Thomas said. And you said, High Representative, what about the humanitarian situation? You said we are going to increase our humanitarian aid. So who are our cooperating partners on the ground? Are they still there? Can they work? And in addition, as Michael said, and as we also discussed during our geopolitical dialogue, how do we prepare for the migration wave which might come with the neighboring countries? Are we in any contact to help them with humanitarian aid to take up refugees? And what's the situation of the talks about the borders? As we know, persons who want to flee are not allowed to come to the airport. So how do we allow them to leave the country if they want to leave the country, if they do not see any future or if they see themselves terribly endangered? So what's the state of discussion in this regard? Is the EU also present in Doha, or how is this going to take place currently?
Thank you, Hildegard Bentele. Now I give the floor to the two representatives of the S&D. First, Tonino Pizzula from AFET, and then Udo Bullmann for DEVE. Tonino.
Thank you, David, and thanks go to Mr. Borrell for his insight. Yeah, while seems to be caught by surprise and analyzing how we got into this situation so fast, we have to put all of our efforts into rapid relocation and safe shelter for Afghan partners. We must also support the neighboring countries with an inevitable influx of the refugees and coordinate our actions on the EU level on this matter too. My question is, are there any plans for devising a new strategy of working with the neighboring states on this? Furthermore, we must engage with international donors to set up distribution channels for humanitarian aid. Even before this crisis, more than half of the citizens were exposed to emergency to acute levels of the food insecurity. So how will this relief will be distributed? Will it be channeled through the Taliban or UN and international NGOs? And finally, we also must not shy away from having frank discussions with our allies. 20 years of investment by NATO countries in nation building, training and equipping Afghani armed forces have come crumbling down within days. Serious questions will need to be asked and answered on how this mission could have gone so wrong. So what are your expectations as these situations undoubtedly affected the perception of the West Alliance? In what way can it affect our future relations? Thank you.
Thank you, Tonino. And now I give the floor to Udo Bullmann.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, David, and thanks, Josep Borrell, for his introductory remarks. I can only underline what colleagues already have said, that in the given situation, it's absolutely number one to provide shelter and protection for the most vulnerable, for our collaborators on the ground, for civic society activists, for women and girls, and to allow those to flee who would like to leave the country. And also let me echo the appeal to put pressure on the new Afghan leadership from the Taliban, as well as on the US troops, to allow them to get freely to the airport without any harm. And the continuation of humanitarian aid is top number two, because we need to face the increasing needs that can already be seen. Hunger crisis with water, social protection, health systems that are going to finish after we are not in the country anymore and our collaborators are not in the country anymore. So we have to find new channels to deliver social protection and the full range of humanitarian aid. Next step has to be that we, and I agree with Josep Borrell, make ourselves in a completely different way another autonomous player in the processes to come. Because there is obviously a growing shift between the US understanding of what had to happen during the last 20 years and the European understanding. How can you live together in 20 years where we underline it's necessary to build up a free society, a stable society, and the newly elected US president says that never was the goal. So the next steps have to be to talk to our allies and to influence these processes with the Taliban, but we will only be able, my guess, to protect the progress achieved, as well as to enhance our support to the Afghan people if the European Union acts united, if we can enforce our political role in this geostrategic exercises that are to come. Otherwise, it will not be possible if we are not a bargaining partner for the processes that have to be seen. I would appreciate if we could do the two chairs, if we could, Thomas and also David, allow for a full debate at the beginning of September or the end of August to realize the new situation and the start of a new policy towards Afghanistan by the European Union. A full debate which is not possible today, but could include and see a joint activity of our both committees. Thank you very much for the occasion today, and good luck to Joseph Borrell.
Thank you, Udo Bullmann. And as regards your proposal, I'm very sure that Afghanistan will continue to be on the agenda of AFET, DEVE, but also our subcommittee on human rights, DROIT. So I think we will be having it, unfortunately, quite a number of times on our agenda, and also, I guess, at the next plenary session in September. So I promise you that Thomas Tobé and I will take your proposal on board. For the Renew Group, I now give the floor to Hilde Woutmans and then Charles Goerens. Hilde Woutmans.
Thank you very much and good morning, colleagues, and thank you, Mr. Borrell. I think we are all very much shocked by what happened in Afghanistan. It's no good news. It's not good news for Afghanistan. It's not good news for Europe. I think especially on the women and girls in Afghanistan who fear for their lives, and for the people who helped Europe. And I'm happy that I hear that it's a priority to get them in Europe. But I also think we have to think broader on all the Afghans who are now fearing for their lives. I think we need to discuss in this European Parliament, and I'm happy to discuss today with AFET and DEVE, but I think we also should discuss with Libe, because I'm very much sure that there will become a new migration crisis, that a lot of Afghans want to flee out of their country, and that we must be prepared for a migration into Europe, and that we are not looking at it like we did in 2015. I'm also very much worried now that the Taliban has taken over in Afghanistan about if it will become a basis for terrorists again. It's not unpredictable. So I think we also need to discuss it on the security level. For me, we should take lessons out of this crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity, Mr. Borrell said. So for me, there are two cases which are very much important. First of all, let's take more steps forward into a defense union, into a real European army. For me, this is really crucial that we can take that steps the next coming months, not years, months, colleagues. And secondly, I think if you look at the people who want to get out of Afghanistan, and honestly, colleagues, if I was living in Afghanistan right now as a woman with a big mouth, I would also want to flee that country and get out of that country. So let's be prepared for the migration. Let's make sure we have a real European migration policy. And then I come to my questions on the US withdrawal. Did we consider taking any actions after the US decided to withdraw? Why was there no plan before? We all knew that they were leaving, and I have the impression that we are too late with our actions. So why didn't we act more early? On the migration, what plan will be set up to prevent another migration crisis such as 2015, and at the same time ensure that Europe does its fair share? Are discussions going on with the neighboring country? Are we looking for a new Turkey deal? I hate to name it like that, but let's face it, will we speak to the countries around Afghanistan? And then what we all think about, what about the dealings with the Taliban? I think it's good that the EU is issuing joint statements with the US and the UK, but what are we doing beyond issuing statements to have a meaningful impact on the Taliban? I think we must make sure that the life of the Afghans will be better. So how will we take actions to talk with the Taliban in the next coming days?
Hilde, I'm very generous with your time. You're way beyond already.
Okay, thank you very much, David. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I was generous now with Udo and Hilde, but please, colleagues, try to keep it to 2 minutes. And you know how difficult it is to remind you of speaking time when you're connected per video. Charles Goerens is the next, and I'm sure that Charles will stick to the 2 minutes.
Oui, je crois que le mot le plus approprié pour résumer la situation actuelle est le mot désastre. Et la situation à laquelle nous avons à faire face est un désastre en premier lieu pour les femmes, pour les agents de la coopération, pour les personnes afghanes qui ont travaillé pour les institutions occidentales, pour les activistes en matière de droits de l'homme ou pour quiconque avait pu respirer un air de liberté au cours des 20 dernières années. Alors face à cela, le Parlement européen doit s'interroger sur ce qu'il importe de faire maintenant et sur la façon dont la politique doit réagir. Quelque chose doit changer. Je vais vous poser quelques questions qui peuvent être banales et qui nous ennuient parce que ça fait des dizaines d'années que nous posons les mêmes questions et nous n'avons pas encore trouvé de réponse. Première question, de quel poids l'Union européenne a-t-elle pu peser dans la décision de retrait? Deuxièmement, de quel poids les États membres de l'Union européenne ont-ils pu peser dans la décision de retrait? Et troisième question, et c'est une question centrale aussi pour la conférence sur l'avenir de l'Europe, qu'est-ce qu'il faut changer au niveau de la politique étrangère de l'Union européenne pour se faire respecter? Alors face à la situation d'impuissance, arrêtons de faire les faux naïfs. Nous avons eu à la sous-commission des droits de l'homme, le 16 juin dernier, un entretien sur lequel j'ai eu l'occasion de dire « Les talibans, je ne leur crois pas un traître mot ». Et c'est à quoi nous assistons aujourd'hui avait été dit en termes les plus clairs. Allez relire ou revoir les déclarations qui ont été faites. Alors face à cela, l'Occident doit se réorganiser. Parce que si les talibans étaient aussi mal organisés que l'Occident, ils n'auraient jamais été en mesure de réinstaller le régime de terreur. Merci.
Merci, Charles. For the ID Group, I now give the floor to Anna Bonfrisco.
Grazie Presidente e grazie a lei, signor Borrell, per essere con noi. Come rappresentante eletta in Italia, membro fondatore dell'Unione Europea, le parlo a nome della migliore gioventù italiana, impegnata nel secondo contingente dopo quello americano, in Afghanistan. 50.000 donne e uomini che si sono avvicendati, 700 feriti, 54 morti e anche 9 miliardi di euro spesi dall'Italia per la missione di peacekeeping. Tutto questo per riconsegnare il paese ai talebani, alle cui parole non possiamo credere, o per affidare il destino dell'Afghanistan all'influenza pakistana, con le chiare conseguenze per l'Europa in termini di flussi migratori incontrollabili, di emergenze dal punto di vista della sicurezza, soprattutto del terrorismo internazionale. E quindi spetta a noi europei, uniti da un indissolubile destino, dimostrare che il sacrificio di tutti i nostri ragazzi europei non è stato vano. E come possiamo farlo? Innanzitutto impedendo il ripetersi degli errori commessi da noi europei nella crisi siriana, che ha prodotto milioni di profughi che ancora portiamo sulla coscienza, così come nel Mediterraneo, dove l'Italia paga il prezzo più alto e non sente mai la vostra solidarietà. Garantendo alle donne, alle ragazze, ai bambini afghani e a chi ha collaborato con noi in questi anni di poter fuggire da quell'inferno che sarà la loro vita sotto il regime talebano, con corridoi umanitari organizzati dall'Unione Europea. Siamo scappati senza dignità e senza rispetto per nessuno, lasciando a Cina, Russia e Turchia l'influenza della regione. Ma non scapperemo al giudizio delle giovani generazioni, il cui futuro di pace e libertà rischiamo di non saper garantire, come i nostri padri fondatori hanno invece garantito a noi. Vi chiedo quindi, chiedo a lei, signor Borrell, rappresentante di tutti noi in questa fase, di fare il nostro dovere per le bambine e i bambini afghani, per tutte le donne, per tutte le ragazze, per chi ha bisogno del nostro aiuto per il rispetto dei propri diritti, ma vi prego di farlo anche per i nostri figli, che un giorno potrebbero non perdonarcelo. Grazie.
Thank you, Madam Bonfrisco. And now I give the floor to Tineke Streek for the Greens, please.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, there are hardly sufficient words for describing this disaster for the Afghan people. They are left alone. Their lives, their rights and their way of life are under imminent threat. And especially, of course, the girls and the women, their lives change into hell. But it's really incomprehensible for us that everyone seems to be taken by surprise by the rapid overtaking by the Taliban, despite the many warnings, the many urgent requests for immediate action. So we need a thorough examination of this procedure and not shy away of any consequences on that. But of course, for now, we need to try to save and do whatever we can in order to protect the people. EU coordination is of vital importance in order to prevent more chaos and inefficiency, and we should make sure that everyone who can be associated with EU or NATO missions are evacuated as swiftly as possible. So we need a broad definition of who those people are and flexible procedure. And I wonder, we have an EU legal basis, we have EU capacities, we have EU policies with the crisis military management. Why has this not been used up until now to evacuate and rescue citizens? And will it be applied at the moment or in the short notice possible? So maybe AS can say something about that. And I completely agree that we must talk with the Taliban in order to ensure access to internally displaced of everyone else in Afghanistan who is in need for help and protection by humanitarian organizations. But there are also Afghan people with a high profile which run even more risks and that need to be evacuated immediately out of Afghanistan as well. And I wonder, did within the Council or EAS discuss already the possibility for humanitarian visa, an EU coordinated approach on that in order to bring those people as soon as possible to the EU? And of course, many people try to flee the land borders. We need to financially support the people in the neighboring countries, of course, maybe through humanitarian organizations if we're not sure about the regimes. But not everyone will be safe there, and we need to take our own responsibility as well. So I think we really should prepare for resettlement programs from the neighboring countries, responsibility sharing for people who arrive at our borders so that we do not end up with huge overcrowded situation at our EU borders, but really have an equally sharing. And I really find it encouraging that Mr. Borrell mentioned the Temporary Protection Directive. This also shows we need an integrated approach. Ms. Streek,
may I remind you kindly that you're over time already? Can you conclude now?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Could we get an overview of an integrated EU policies concerning foreign policies, home policies, human rights and humanitarian aid, and show us how we are going to really make an integrated approach and have a further debate on that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the ECR, I would have liked to give the floor to Mr. Rashikovsky and Ms. Kemper. I am informed that both are not connected. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Both ECR colleagues are not connected, so I then move on to the representative of the left, Idoia Villanueva. Are you connected? Then I give you the floor.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Muchísimas gracias al alto representante, señor Borrell, por estar hoy con nosotros. El colapso de Afganistán es el nudo y es el fin de dos eras, la de las intervenciones militares extranjeras y la del propio seguidismo de Europa a Estados Unidos. 20 años después no hay excusas. Biden dijo que se intervino contra el terrorismo, no por razones humanitarias, y esto también ha sido un fracaso, porque al terrorismo se le combate en su raíz, en sus causas. Las consecuencias ya las vemos. Es un desastre previsible, con millones de recursos gastados, con miles de vidas cegadas, incluso también con bombardeos de la OTAN. Apoyo a la corrupción, a los señores de la guerra y no a la educación y al trabajo. Hoy es el momento de apostar por un giro radical en la seguridad humana y migraciones con derecho, y se nos acabaron las excusas. No hay más justificaciones a intervenciones militares de este tipo, pero necesitamos acciones concretas para defender hoy los derechos fundamentales. Mayoritariamente sabemos en dificultades las mujeres, las niñas y muchos otros activistas en mayor vulnerabilidad. Necesitamos trabajar conjuntamente por los derechos humanos. Sabemos que los conflictos y nuestra responsabilidad en ellos destrozan países, pero también llegan sus consecuencias en modo boomerang a Europa. Por eso, por justicia con Afganistán y por la defensa de los derechos que promulgamos, necesitamos hoy que Europa trabaje contundentemente, de forma coordinada, por mantener los corredores humanitarios, con una política de visados específica y canales de reasentamiento, como ya anunció, por ejemplo, Canadá. Agradecemos al Gobierno de España su proactividad en la actual salida y acogida, pero es algo que debe ser impulsado por toda Europa. Debemos liderar también conversaciones con Rusia, con China. Necesitamos una posición propia europea en favor de la paz, el diálogo, los derechos, y por eso también toca hoy hacer un trabajo respetuoso e integral con las migraciones y el refugio, y invertir en ayuda humanitaria también con los países vecinos, con la sociedad civil, para poder ayudar en esa acogida. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Idoia Villanueva. Since I couldn't give the floor to a representative from the ECR group, I will now give the floor to a replacement. The next on my speaking list would be Asita Kanko. Ms. Kanko, are you connected? Then I'm happy to give you the floor now.
Yes, thank you very much, David, also for holding this important debate. I would sadly like to notice that if the EU rises against the Taliban with the level of passion that our High Representative is displaying today, then the Taliban can continue feeling safe and undisturbed in Afghanistan. They have actually taken over, and the situation is awful, as we all know, and the situation for women and girls is absolutely horrific. Anyone could predict that the Taliban would recapture Afghanistan in no time. So where has the world been? What a monumental and historic failure of foreign policy. So many world leaders should be deeply ashamed now, including former President Ghani, whose attitude of shamelessly abandoning his people and fleeing with cash shows that we have sponsored corruption for so many years. Where is the accountability? This is not only a bloody foreign policy blunder, but also a humanitarian disaster, especially for women and girls, and a global disaster for freedom versus Islamism. Together with international partners, the EU must urgently assume its responsibilities for the Afghan people that are being abandoned, for example, by anticipating a migration crisis and helping organize the necessary support in the region. I welcome the fact that foreign ministers of member states agreed on the need to evacuate our local EU staff, but the same must be ensured for Afghans who have fought for our common values and now risk losing their lives because they have been left behind. The EU should also not recognize the Taliban as a legitimate government in Afghanistan, but we must also ensure that we do not leave the region geopolitically in the hands of Russia, China, and Pakistan, and I totally agree in this with also our High Representative. Let us be critical and vigilant, but above all, let us not close the door on the women and men of Afghanistan who want to be good. Humanitarian and development activities that circumvent the Taliban regime should be maintained and focus on the dire situation of women and girls. Thank you, and let's help achieve this change together.
Thank you very much, dear Asita Kanko. Colleagues, we now have 8 minutes left before I would then like to give the floor to Mr. Gentilini. So I will try to move on and give further colleagues the floor, 1 minute each, and please be brief. We begin with Isabel Vissela-Lima from the EPP.
Merci David. Merci aux représentants de ces paroles. Mon point de vue sera celui des droits humains, mais aussi celui de la crédibilité et de la confiance dans les pays occidentaux. En Syrie, nous avons abandonné les Kurdes après qu'ils nous avaient aidés à combattre les terroristes. En Afghanistan, nous abandonnons ces Afghans qui défendent nos valeurs et auxquels nous avons fait miroiter un ordre social qui aujourd'hui accroît leur frustration et les met en danger. Quelle communauté, quel peuple croiront encore en les puissances occidentales? Aussi, je me demande, comme Hilde Voutmans, quand, en tant qu'Union européenne, nous reconnaîtrons le besoin d'avoir une force de défense autonome, efficace et commune, sans nous contenter de nous reposer sur la puissance militaire américaine. Je voudrais aussi m'enquérir de notre marge de manœuvre pour apporter notre aide, ou du moins influencer la situation des femmes et des filles en Afghanistan. Là où les talibans se sont installés, elles sont privées de leurs droits et brutalement opprimées. Enfin, je voudrais instamment plaider pour que les pays de l'Union européenne soient généreux dans l'accueil, bien évidemment des Afghans qui ont directement travaillé avec nous, mais aussi de ceux de la société civile qui se sont engagés pour les droits humains, notamment pour l'éducation des filles et les droits des femmes. Ils sont particulièrement en danger. Nous n'avons pas le droit de les abandonner. Merci beaucoup.
Merci bien, Isabelle. For the S&D, I give the floor to Elena Yoncheva. Is she connected?
Yes. Thank you. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, de me donner la parole. Et Monsieur Borrel, trois questions très précises. Premièrement, préparez-vous des accords spécifiques entre l'Union européenne et les pays tiers pour l'accueil des réfugiés afghaniens, par exemple avec la Turquie et les pays voisins d'Afghanistan? Deuxièmement, le principal point d'entrée pour les réfugiés afghans illégaux en Europe, c'est la Bulgarie. Et quels seront les engagements concrets de l'Union européenne si la frontière bulgare est soumise à une pression énorme? L'Union européenne peut-elle s'engager maintenant pour une relocation de réfugiés illégaux, distribution vers d'autres pays européens? Envisagez-vous un tel scénario? Et dans l'Union européenne, vous savez, la responsabilité doit être partagée. Et la troisième question, envisagez-vous de travailler avec la Russie et la Chine pour faciliter le contact avec les talibans? Si oui, quel est l'état de ce dialogue? Je vous remercie.
Thank you. A speaker for the Renew Group might be Soraya Rodriguez. Is she connected?
Sí, muchas gracias por este debate. Estamos ante una emergencia, una catástrofe humanitaria provocada por una retirada de las tropas que podemos decir que ha sido un completo desastre. Y en este sentido quiero señalar que debemos ser honestos a la hora de analizar cómo hemos podido hacer un seguidismo de la retirada de las tropas de Estados Unidos cuando sí teníamos claros signos de que este colapso en Afganistán se podía reducir tras el proceso de paz de los niveles enormes y habían avanzado claramente recuperando amplias zonas del país. Por eso ahora estando de acuerdo en que nuestra principal objetivo prioritario.
Ms. Rodriguez, I'm sorry, the connection is bad and you cannot be interpreted. There are obviously some technical issues. That's why only a few of us speak Spanish.
Okay.
But I will, in the meantime, give the floor to our next speaker. That would be for the Greens, Pirette Herzberger-Fofana. Is Madame Herzberger-Fofana connected?
Mrs. Herzberger, you can press the speak button.
1 minute. 1 minute. If she's not able to be connected, then Yak Madison.
Vous m'entendez?
There you are, Pirette. Please, 1 minute.
Oui, oui. Yes, thank you very much. Bon, merci, chers collègues, d'avoir organisé ce débat. Nous sommes tous sous cette onde de choc à la suite de la prise du pouvoir des talibans et nous sommes confrontés donc à un état d'urgence avec le retrait des troupes qui marque un échec monumental, ce qui va remettre en question la politique migratoire de l'Union européenne et de tous ses exilés. La peur règne en Afghanistan, il faut donc en tirer maintenant des leçons. L'Union européenne doit faire preuve de solidarité vis-à-vis de tous ceux qui ont contribué à propager les droits humains. En effet, les femmes afghanes avaient contribué à l'édification d'une société civile démocratique. Elles espéraient également ouvrir des perspectives aux générations suivantes de femmes qui leur succéderaient. Tous ces droits acquis vont être à coup sûr confisqués par le nouveau régime fondamentaliste. Même si les talibans font des déclarations de façade, telles que les femmes pourraient travailler dans les limites de la charia, que signifie cela? Les talibans accepteront-ils que les femmes occupent des postes de décision? Non, puisque déjà dans les régions qui ont été conquises par eux, ils les ont renvoyées de leur travail, ils les ont également renvoyées de l'université. Donc l'Union européenne doit apporter une aide humanitaire et un soutien à tous ceux qui ont besoin de notre protection. Nous devons peut-être envisager l'obtention de visas humanitaires afin de faire évacuer non seulement ceux qui ont travaillé pour nous, mais également les activistes qui ont défendu nos valeurs. Il va donc falloir trouver de nouveaux canaux de communication avec les talibans afin qu'ils acceptent de respecter les droits des femmes et au besoin même faire pression.
Thank you.
Une phrase. Étant l'un des grands bénéficiaires de l'aide européenne, l'Union européenne doit donc voir comment faire afin que les droits humains, qui sont des droits universels, ne soient pas compromis avec le nouveau régime et assurer la sécurité et la dignité des femmes. Merci.
Thank you, Madam. Jack Madison from the ID Group is not connected, so I give the floor to Claire Daly for the left. She's the first Vice President of the Afghanistan delegation. Claire, are you with us?
I can. Thanks, and thanks to the High Representative. Very briefly, High Representative made the point what went wrong, but he didn't make any attempt to answer that. And I think we have a situation from where 2001, the Taliban, from the point of surrender, billions of years later, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, and they're now in total control. It wasn't a surprise, and steps are being taken to learn those lessons, because we kept repeating the same mistakes and propping up a government and a state apparatus that frankly was corrupt and weak. But in terms of the humanitarian issues and resettlement programmes, this is absolutely vital, and I'd like to ask, particularly in terms of the readmission agreements that we've negotiated with Afghanistan, where we were returning refugees, has there been on this? Are these arrangements now null and void, because we can't be told returning here? We need to open our borders to humanitarian access. And can I ask as well, is there support for the idea of UN fact-finding mission into human rights abuses, as has been requested? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Claire Daly. Also a rather difficult connection there, but I believe we're able to understand most of what you said. Colleagues, I will now conclude with the last few speakers. Unfortunately, I couldn't give the floor to all of you, but the next on my list would be the next speaker of the EPP. Is Peter van Dalen connected? Then it's Peter's turn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. We are facing a complete disaster. In Afghanistan already, several female journalists are no longer on television. Women and girls now fear every day, and the sale of burqas already has a new highlight. The question is, when will refugees come to Europe, and when will terrorists come to Europe? So I have three questions. First of all, what actions can be taken to support the remaining Afghans who are not Taliban friends? Two, how will the EU set up an immigration policy for the refugees, and how will we stop the influx of terrorists? And three, since we have now three evil states, Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan, next to one another, how will the EES deal with the GSP plus status of Pakistan? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Nacho Sanchez Amor is with us here in the room. The floor is yours.
Gracias, David. Gracias, señor Borrell. Es obvio que hemos analizado mal
tanto el colapso militar como el colapso político del que se ha hablado menos. Y, por tanto, vuelvo a una idea que ya tuve ocasión de exponer al señor Borrell. No vamos a ser un actor global si no tenemos un servicio de inteligencia propio que nos permita tener una información de cómo nos movemos en el terreno, y me alegro ver que esa idea que yo expuse hace meses está siendo retomada por algunos colegas. Si va a haber o no un gran flujo de exilados, y me alegro mucho de que el señor Borrell utilice esa palabra, que es la que en España referimos a los demócratas que tuvieron que huir después de nuestra guerra civil, si va a haber un gran flujo migratorio va a depender de la sinceridad de esa apariencia moderada de los talibanes en este momento. Pero ¿qué ojos vamos a tener allí? ¿Qué representación va a tener la Unión Europea para analizar la sinceridad de esa apariencia moderada? Y, sobre todo, el corazón del asunto que el señor Borrell dejó caer en su rueda de prensa. Esta situación cuestiona nuestra capacidad para exportar democracia. Nosotros, al contrario que los americanos, reconocemos que sí queríamos hacer nation building y no ha funcionado. Por tanto, es obvio que no podemos seguir utilizando el mismo enfoque y los mismos instrumentos si queremos que la democracia se imponga en lugares de conflicto. Gracias.
Thank you. And to conclude, I give the floor to Barry Andrews, the Renew representative in DEVE, and then I hand over to Mr. Gentilini. Barry, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, David. I just want to make some very brief points. I welcome Mr. Borrell's reference to the Temporary Protection Directive 2001, which is there to cope when member states are struggling with an asylum surge, but it has never been used, and it depends on voluntary efforts by member states. So I'm delighted that Mr. Borrell is putting it up to the EU Council, and I think that we need to identify safe and legal pathways. We need to coordinate, of course, with the United Kingdom. The definition of a refugee is having a well-founded fear of persecution, and no greater demonstration of that could be had than people clinging to the wheels of an aeroplane. So we need to look at this not as a EU border security issue, as some EU member state leaders have done, but as an Afghan humanitarian issue. And I join with the consensus that our priority after evacuation should be for sending a strong message to women and girls of our support and solidarity. I'm sorry to say that female emancipation was a useful and now discarded fig leaf for US and NATO adventurism. And it is extremely disappointing. Finally, David and Thomas, I would join with Petros Astrovicius in his call for an extraordinary session of the European Parliament to address this. The UK Parliament met this week, other parliaments have met, and I think it would be highly appropriate for us to underline the urgency of this by calling for a session of the European Parliament. Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you, Barry Andrews, also for your statement. And I think there's consensus in this House that we will have a plenary debate also on this issue. But, of course, it's up to the group leaders to address this issue in the Conference of Presidents. But we all can talk to our group leaders and the chief whips to make this possible. Colleagues, thank you so much for all your contributions. Very interesting questions, very valuable remarks. And now I hand over to Fernando Gentilini, who has the difficulty of trying to answer as many questions as possible. We're already running, well, we still have 3 minutes, but I think we can do until 22, perhaps 22:11. So you now have 10, 15 minutes to answer all these questions. Fernando, the floor is yours.
Mr. Gentilini, please press on the speak button. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me well now. And good morning to all. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'll try to do my best. It was a very, very comprehensive debate, lots of questions, all legitimate, all good. And these are the topics, the issue which will be at the center of the following weeks for sure. Because to start with some of those questions, some of you mentioned the importance at this stage to consult first of all with allies, but also to consult regionally consult with other partners, and this is precisely, I think, what is going on now, and the High Representative referred to his next engagement of the day, which is the G7, but there will be many occasions to go in depth and precisely do that honest assessment he was referring to, and many of you have referred to. Maybe the way I can try to be of useful, to be of some help, is to focus on some practical information and issues to respond to the questions, because I think the representative gave a very broad and comprehensive brief which has touched already many of the also more political questions. I want to first really start with this evacuation, because many of you referred to that. And true, this is the priority, in the sense that this is really the most important thing that we are doing. This is the most important thing our men on the ground are focused on. And it has been already said, our head of delegation has been there all the time with his security support. 4 more people are currently trying to get to Kabul. They are currently, I think, in Pakistan. So this is really very, very important. And some of you in the questions refer to obstacle to evacuation. True, there are many obstacles, but I think at this point, precisely because we want to succeed in this operation, we need to be grateful to all those who are on the ground helping our people to rescue our local staff, our Afghan local staffs and their family. The High Representative gave already some figures of those arrived in Spain. I just want to say again that beyond this initial, let's say, 400, which are the current employee of the delegation and their family, there will be more to rescue, because we will have to extend to civil society, to human rights defender, to people who need to leave for the reasons which have came out very clearly in this debate. I myself, I served in Kabul a few years ago. I think I know what it takes to get to the airport. As it has been said by some of you, some of the obstacles. No, first of all, you need to get to the airport. And of course, in order to do that, you need the cooperation of many. Most importantly, those who control the city. Those who control this only street, which leads from downtown to airport, and where there are bottlenecks also in normal days. There were bottlenecks also in normal times, so you can imagine the situation now. And again, I think we need to be grateful to all our people on the ground, but also all those who are helping them. I don't think uniforms are important at this stage. I don't think it's important to distinguish. I think we are talk to the human beings who are helping this operation. Hopefully, it will be able to create a safe corridor. Hopefully, it will be able to do this, as it has been said, in a European way. I would say in an orderly way. But of course, these are very, very difficult times in Kabul, at the airport of Kabul, and we are in touch with all those who can help. And this is a full-time job since last week. I want to say that because all the questions which have been raised, of course, are very important, are very critical, and in order to work on them also in the future, we will need to, first of all, be able to have our people out of the airport again. So my first point was to convey this sense of urgency and priority, which I think was shared in the discussion with the Foreign Ministry, that first of all we need to take care of this. A second big block of questions, I think, was related to the issue of, let's say, preparedness. How it comes, it was said that nobody was prepared, that everybody was surprised. And politically many things have been said, but in practical terms, in terms on what one can really do in the various areas which have been mentioned, I want to say that in fact there are already schemes in place with this big let's say, difference, as it has been said by the representative, between everything which is humanitarian, which will have to increase massively because people will be much more in need of humanitarian help, and what is development, which is, as it has been said, subject to conditionality. But we have mechanisms already in place at several levels. I will go through them now. But to say that, of course, it will be an issue to increase the effort. It will be an issue to readjust initiatives. But it's not, and this is my major message, it's not that we are starting from scratch. We have something in place, for instance, to deal with migration. There are existing frameworks of cooperation. There are ongoing conversations, as you all know, among member states. There are legal pathways. But again, this is a special situation, and some of you have remarked what the HRBP pointed to when you referred to the Directive 2001, this way of dealing not just from a security angle, but considering what's going on and considering the need of these people and considering what are our values in this context. Refugees is the same. Is not a new issue. There are millions of Afghan refugees already now in neighboring countries, in Iran, in Pakistan, in many places. And there are schemes to assist the UN, essentially UNHCR, in helping that. There are assistance programs, which of course we will have to be strengthened. Humanitarian, most, it has been asked also, of our partners are the UN agency, but there are also NGOs. We will need to assess, again, where people go out of the airport, who is best placed to deliver, because we already, and it has been said, for many NGOs, it might have become already much more difficult to deliver, especially those where women are working. So it's something we will need to see. But it's not that we start from scratch. We have a network, and we will have to see how possible will be to use and continue to use that network, extend that network. I don't need to go into figures. We have massively invested in humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. I can only guess that this is going to continue and to increase because the demand will be bigger. These are all areas, by the way, which will go then into the political, because these are precisely the lever that we have in order to make sure that things happen on the ground in the new way, in all possible ways, because, as it has been said, no one wants to believe to promises which are made these days, and people will have to be judged on facts, on deeds, on what they will actually do. Again, that's why, to conclude, because I see the time is running, it's good to go back again on evacuation, because this is the first test. This is the first test to see whether there is a way to get out something good through these new forms of cooperation that we will need to invent. So I think I will conclude here. I'm sorry if I could not go in details of the many questions here and there, but I think some have been already answered by the High Representative himself, and I really wanted to focus on this more urgent and immediate needs, because I think this is also what is emerging from our discussion in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Council. And many thanks to all.
Thank you, Mr. Gentilini. Dear colleagues, let me thank all of you for participating in today's meeting, for your comments, questions and remarks. Rest assured that the very serious situation in Afghanistan will continue to be very high on our agenda, and I guess we will have an additional meeting of AFET and DEVA to discuss many of the issues more in detail when we reconvene in September. Let me thank especially the staff who organised this meeting during the parliamentary summer break, and also our interpreters who are with us today and who are also so kind to stay a little longer. I will skip my closing remarks because we've already run out of time. Once again, thank you for participating in today's extraordinary meeting of AFET and DEVA, together with our colleagues from the Afghanistan delegation. And if there are no points from your side under any other business, then I can now close today's meeting. Thank you.